Welcome back to the learning partners. So in this video, we are going to see some of the basic Angular interview question and which we are mainly focusing if you are a learner or any fresher who is appearing for the Angular interview. So we are not going into deep or any advanced interview question, just the basic, and it will cover only the topics we have in Angular, right? So starting with component. So if we say the component, the first question anyone will ask you like, what is component? So this is the simplest definition we have in Angular. Component are the basic UI building block of an Angular app, right? So what components contain? Component contains some HTML template, CSS, and some code, right? It's a combination. When we used to say, when we design a HTML page, so we have a HTML page. Inside script section, we used to declare variables, functions, everything, coding. And in style section, we used to write the classes. Now that thing we have in Angular in a component, but HTML is in a separate file, CSS are in the separate file, and code is in the .ts file, right? So again, you can say like an Angular app contains a tree of Angular component. Angular components are the subset of directive. So component is nothing but a directive, but it has a template. So you can see always associated with a template. And only one component can be instantiated for a given element in a template. Means if we have an element, we can add any n number of directives on a particular element, but a component will be instantiated only once, right? So this is the definition of component. Next thing, what is component decorator? So first, either you can explain the decorator, like decorators are the small piece of code which we assign about the class, right? Which will identify like what type of class that is, right? So like that, we have component decorator. So you can see this is the decorator component, and inside that we have certain, these are the mandatory properties we have in component decorator. Selector. So this will denote like what is the component unique selector. Then template URL. So like for this component, what is my HTML template is going to be. Then style URL. You can have multiple style statements for the style URL. So here you can see array is there, right? So component decorator allows you to mark a class for an Angular component, provide additional metadata that determine how the component should be processed, right? So these are the various properties we have in component decorator. So these are the mandatory one, but it's based the remaining properties also. It's better to have knowledge of those, like change detection, encapsulation, entry component, interpolation, providers, selector, style URL, style, template, and template URL. So these are the various other fields we have in the component decorator. Next thing, what is template? So template is just an HTML view where you can display your data bindings and everything, right? So a template is like whatever the file, external file, or a template you create in a component. So here you can see this is the component decorator where you can see external file is we are providing. So that's why we have used template URL. But what if I don't, my code is very small. HTML, in HTML, I don't have that much big code. Only let's say 2 or 3 divs are there, 1 or 2 display elements are there. So rather than creating extra file, you can create HTML in component decorator itself. You can see instead of template URL, you have to use template and design the HTML here only. So now you don't need to create another HTML file, and that you are going to use it here. So you can design your template over here also. So this is nothing but template, right? Either you can use template and design whole HTML in here only in .ts. Otherwise, you can create a separate HTML file and then you can use it, right? So a template is a HTML view where you can display data bindings, control, or the properties of the Angular component. You can store your component template in one or the two places, right? By using template or using template URL, right? Next thing, another important question related to component is lifecycle hooks of the component. So there are a number of lifecycle hooks you can see, and the order, they have the order also. So lifecycle hooks means, forget about the Angular, just consider a simple web page. Whenever the web page load on the browser, it goes through certain events, right? So when the page, before loading that page, once the page load, once all the content of that page loaded, if we have some images or video or anything that get loaded, and when we close that tab, so before closing that page and after closing that, there are some events which are there in the JavaScript also, normal page. So same kind of events we have in Angular, right? So those are nothing but the lifecycle hooks. So you can see order is like following. First constructor will be called. After that, lifecycle event will be triggered. So ng on changes, ng on init, ng do check, ng after content init, ng after content check, ng after view init, ng after view check, and ng on destroy. So if you are targeting for a fresher interview, so it is expected that you just inform all the lifecycle hooks, right? It is not mandatory that you should explain everything, but at least one or two you should be able to explain. Let's say ng on init. This is called whenever the initialization of the directives and component of the Angular first deploy the data bound properties. Means ng on init event will trigger when component initialize and all the data binding properties are initialized in the HTML template, right? Then ng on changes. This event will get triggered whenever the value of the data bound property changes. This method will be called. Then ng after view init, right? When the view of the HTML means view of the template is successfully initialized, after that, this event will get triggered, right? Then last is ng on destroy. ng on destroy means when you are about to navigate or you are about to hide the component, then this event will trigger. Means when you are destroying the component, before destroying, this event will get triggered. So you can see you can do all the cleanup activity in this event. So out of this, you can just remember ng on changes, ng on init, ng after view init, and ng on destroy. If you think like you can remember everything, go ahead. But if you think like you are not going to be remember all this, so just remember these four: ng on changes, ng on init, ng after view init, and ng on destroy. Because these are the most important one, and these are the events which we normally use in project. Let's go to next. Now we are discussing the questions on the component. So when we talk about the component, there is a concept like data binding, right? Because whatever the variable, whatever the data we have to display that in the HTML. Otherwise, there is no use of that variables, right? So data binding, simple definition is a core concept of Angular by which Angular allows us to bind data from component.ts to HTML and send data from to HTML to .ts, means vice versa. Means whatever the variable we declare in the .ts, you can display that into the HTML, and from HTML also you can send some data back to the .ts. So there are mainly two types of data binding: one-way data binding and two-way data binding, right? In one-way data binding also there are two types: from component to DOM, means from .ts to HTML. So first is interpolation, that is curly braces, curly braces. Second is property binding, right? Then this is from .ts to HTML, means flow. If you declare any variable and show that variable in the interpolation, so that is whatever the value you declare inside the component.ts, that value will be displayed over there. Same as property binding also. So property binding is nothing but what are the properties we have that we wrap inside the square bracket and provide the value, right? Then from HTML to .ts, means from DOM to component, that is event binding. So you can write click event, then you can call the function, and in function you can send the parameter also. So that is data binding. Now next thing is two-way data binding. So two-way data binding is, let's say you create a variable and you bind that variable into the text box using ng model. So whatever the value you put that into that variable at the initialization, that will be displayed into the text box. But if you change the value also, it will change the variable value also, means vice versa. If you change the value in the .ts, it will get reflected to the HTML. And if you change the value into the HTML, it will get reflected to that variable also. That is why it is getting called as a two-way data binding. Means if you change here, it will reflect there. And if you change here, it will reflect there, vice versa thing. So this is about data binding. This is the most important question, and everyone is going to ask you this. Next thing is, if we said like components, Angular app contains so many components, right? So there must be a way by which we should, or there must be a scenario where we need to send some value from one component to another. So there are various ways by which we can communicate with the component, right? So there are two scenarios. First, if we have parent to child relationship, and if we don't have the parent to child relationship. So you can see if we have parent child relationship, you can communicate with different component by using input and output, right? So these are the property decorator, input and output. So using input, you can send the data, and using output, you can send the data from child to parent. Then second way is using ViewChild. Okay. So in parent component, you can create the ViewChild of the component, and then you can receive the data from the child component. Then if we don't have the parent-child relationship, means components are not related in any ways, right? So we have several other ways. First is using services, and by storing values into variable. Let's say you have a common service and you create a variable and variable object, and inside that object you can add in number of properties, and then you can access that into both the component. Then second way is using subject and subject behavior of RxJS. So we get event callback, right? So we can create a subject or a subject behavior, and then using next and subscribe, you can send and receive the data. Third is using routing. So when routing is also kind of an important topics we have in Angular. So when you navigate from one component to another, you can send some data to another component by a query parameter. In the URL, you can send some data, right? So that is using routing. The last one of the ways, it's not related to Angular, but we can use session storage or local storage to store the data, and then you can read that. Let's say in admin component, you have stored some data, and when you navigate to the user component, you need to just read that data. So this is also a way of component communication. It's not an ideal way, but we can, in some scenarios, you have to use this also. So whenever someone asks you what are the various ways how component can communicate, so these are the all possible ways you can inform. Next is ViewChild. So we have seen like ViewChild here. So ViewChild is like if you want to access a DOM element reference in .ts or any component instance. So what you can see, if you need, ViewChild is like in JavaScript we used to do document.getElementById. by ID. So that that used to gives you the DOM element reference. So same thing in Angular we can achieve using ViewChild. So let's say you have a paragraph like this. So you can create a hash property like this. Then in .ts you can create ViewChild, and this title means ViewChild name you have to apply in the hash property. Then this is your a title, and data type is element reference, means because we are getting the reference of this element. Then you can use this dot element native element. This is equivalent to document dot get element by ID. Then what are the style, color, all the CSS. If you have to read some value, assign some value, all the things we used to do in JavaScript, all you can do with the ViewChild. Now this is we have created ViewChild of an HTML element, but we can use the same to create the instance of the component also. So you can see @ViewChild, and we have to pass the component name, right? And the data type will be component. So if in the HTML you have the component rendered, then using this dot user component, you can access all the properties of this user component in your parent component. So this is the ViewChild. It is again, this is not a basic question, but someone might ask you. So better be prepared for this also. So these are the questions with component. Let's go to the next, that is directive. So directive again is kind of a most important topics we have. So directives, simple definition is like directive adds behavior to an existing DOM element, right, or an existing component instance. This is the simple definition. Directives add behavior to an existing DOM element or existing component instance. Multiple directives can be applied to a single DOM element. Means, let's say we have a text box. So on that text box, we can add multiple directives. Okay. We can create our custom directives also. So you can see this is the example of my custom directive, a simple one, that is highlight. So this is my directive name, and inside the directive in constructor, I'm getting the reference of that element, and I'm adding some background color. And we can add that directive. My directive selector name is my highlight. So we can add it like this on any element tag. Okay. So directive has all the lifecycle hooks of the component. Like what are the lifecycle hooks we have discussed in the component? Directive supports everything, because I told you like the component is also kind of a directive. So what are the directives? What are the lifecycle event the component has? All are being supported by the directive also. Some of the famous directives are router outlet, router link, ViewChild, ngModel, ngUsage. These are nothing but the directive, right? So you might think like router link is not a directive, router outlet is a, but yes, these are also a directive. Then we have types of directive. So basically we just have two, but if we speak as a broadly, so we have four. First is a structural directive. Structural means in the word itself, it is stating like structural means it can change the structure. It can deal with the structure. So you can see responsible to add or remove element from the DOM. So structural directives are responsible to add or remove element from the your component HTML. Means ngIf and ngFor. So ngIf to add and to remove, and ngFor to only add new elements, right? It iterate. Then attribute directive. So attribute means properties, right? So responsible to add extra behavior to existing element. Means it cannot add or remove, or it cannot create new elements, but it can add extra behavior to the existing element. So we can achieve that using ng class and ng style. Structural directive will start with star, and attribute directive will enclose in a square bracket. Then component is also kind of a directive. Then we can create our custom directive. So to create the custom directive, command is ng generate directive and your directive name, whatever you need to give. Let's see in the detail like what is structural directive. Directive, again the same definition. Directive which are responsible to add or remove element are called as a structural directive. Types, ngIf. So ngIf is used to add or remove element from the components. Means we use it normally to hide and show element based on the condition. What ngIf need is true and false value. So you can see we write the ngIf like this: star ngIf I is capital is equal to variable. So you can see we have created a variable which is having boolean data type and false value is true. So if the value is true, then this h1 will be visible. If this variable value is having false, then it will remove this h1 from the DOM, right? So if we have to pass the true value to the ngIf, it will display element or it will hide it. Hide it means it will remove it. Next is ngFor. So star ngFor is used as a for loop is nothing but a for loop, but it is used in the HTML page to iterate over any elements. It needs array to iterate because we use the for loop on the array, right? So we have to pass the array to the ngFor to iterate. So see, I have created an array variable that is city list is of a data type string and it is array. Inside that I have some list of the string, array of string that I can use over the paragraph. So you can see this is the syntax: star ngFor f is capital, just like if is I is capital in if. Then this is the syntax: let city of city list. This is my variable name. Then we can print using interpolation. So this is just a normal for loop. Then attribute directive. So first is the ng style. So you can see if I have created a variable where I have color :red, width :200. This looks like an object, but it is having CSS. So this is key and this is value. This is CSS key and this is value, right? So you can see on the paragraph I can use ng style and I can directly pass the variable name, that is my style. So this paragraph will have this CSS, this style applied. Second way is, you can see I have created another variable that is my height, and here I have stored 500 pixel. It should not be number, it should be text, my height, and it is storing 500 pixel. Now I can use this in div. You can see ng style, then object. So you can see object is there, then key, height, and then I have provided my variable name. So these are the two ways by we can use ng style. Second is ng class. So there are three ways by we can use ng class. So first is if we have a variable and in that variable we have some class name. So directly you can use ng class and this provide the variable name. So for this paragraph, this class will be added. Second is using ternary operator, means either or, either this class or this class based on the condition. So you can see I have created two variables, num1 and num2, both having the same value. So I have written the condition like if num1 is equal to num2, if this is true, this class will be applied or this class will be applied. This is ternary operator. You can see question mark and colon separator. So if this condition is true, this class will be added, otherwise this class. So this is second way. Third way is because we have a limitation over here. We can add only two classes based on the condition. What if we have to add the multiple classes based on multiple condition? So we can do like that. ng class will be same. So you can see here we have to use object. Then you can see this is the class, and this class will be applied if this condition satisfied. Whatever the condition you need to write it over. here, then comma to separate it out. Again, second class colon, this is condition C. Like this, we can provide the condition. If this condition get true, this class will be added. Again, comma, third class and third condition. So you can add n number of conditions and with n number of classes. So these are the three possible ways by which you can use ng class, right? So this comes to an end of a directive question. Next is pipe. So pipe is also the simplest example or the topic we have. We use pipe just to transform the data or format the data when we display into the component HTML. That's it. We format the data before displaying it into the HTML. That is the only use pipe has. So Angular has provided some default pipes like date pipe, uppercase, lowercase, decimal, currency, async pipe, slice pipe, right? We can create a custom pipes also. So you can see this is the basic code of a custom pipe. Pipe name will be there. Transform method will be there. Here someone will ask you like what is the default method we have in custom pipe. So that is transform, and it has two parameters. First is the value and second is the argument. You can see spread operator is there. So you can send multiple operator also. So transform function you just have to remember. When you create a custom pipe, it will by default implement transform method, right? So again, one more question, pure and impure pipe. So when we create the pipe now, here you can see pure is equal to false or true, same value you can pass. So definition is pure pipe is called when Angular detects a change in the value or the parameter passed to it. So when we say, when we create a pipe pure, right? So it will trigger if the only value or the parameter get changed. But if we say pure, if we create an impure pipe, means if it is pure is equal to false, so doesn't matter what variable value change, every time this pipe will get triggered. So you can see impure pipe is called for every change detection, no matter whether the value or the parameter change. Means wherever you use the pipe, doesn't matter if that value or parameter change, if any variable value change into that template, this pipe will execute. So performance wise, it is not good to use the pipe because for every change detection, this is going to execute. So unnecessary processing is there, right? So this is pure and impure pipe, parameter is pipe. So let's say birthday we have, so date, let's consider in birthday variable, we have the date, right? So from that date, we can use the date pipe, and for date pipe, we can send the parameter like this. This is the format what we can send. Okay, like this, you can create a custom pipe also, and you can send the value. So this is nothing but parameterized pipe. Chaining pipe. So we can add multiple pipes also. So you can see birthday pipe, birthday variable is there. Outside that, we have added a date pipe, then uppercase pipe, and number of pipes you can add, and the execution will be from left to right. Okay, so this is chaining of multiple pipe. Then async pipe. So async pipe is kind of a hard. Let's say this does not come into the basic question, so since we have it. So async pipe subscribe to an observable. So let's say we have created an observable which is returning time after certain interval. So we can subscribe to that into the HTML like this using async pipe. Okay, if you are not getting this, you can skip it because it doesn't come in the basic questions. Then what is the difference if we call the pipe in .ts and HTML? We can call the pipe in .ts also, okay, and HTML also. So if we call the pipe in the .ts, it will modify the actual value, but if we call the pipe in the HTML, it won't modify the value. So this is the difference we have. Normally, no one will ask it, but someone will ask just to check your knowledge, like if you know the things properly or not. So this comes to an end with the pipe. Then we have services. So service is nothing but a class which we use to provide common functionality across the whole application. So if you say service is just a class where we create multiple functions, and that function we use over multiple components. So this is the service. So this is the simplest definition you can inform. So service is nothing but a class which we use to provide common functionality across whole application. Again, you can elaborate, like we can create common functions which can be used or multiple components, or it can be an API call function or any normal functions which is returning some value. So you can see the difference here. This is a API call function which is returning the data we get from this particular API. And second function is a normal function which accepts two parameters, and it is just returning the sum of the two parameters we get. This is just a normal function, but logic can be anything. So this is service. Next thing, dependency injection. So when we talk about the service, we can cover the topic like dependency injection. So again, this is the word which seems to like very hard, but and definition is also kind of a very hard if you search in the Google. So the in the simplest word you can say like dependency injection is nothing but a process of object creation into constructor of any class, right? So this is in constructor, whatever the object we create in the constructor now, this process is getting called as a dependency injection. So in service, we have created the object of HTTP client, right? Now you can see the reference. This is a service. Now, if we are in the component, so this is the component code. So we created the, see, this is the service, master service. And if we have to create the master service object into the component, so we create that in the constructor. So you can see wherever we have constructor and wherever we create any object into the constructor. So it doesn't matter it is component or service or pipe or directive. Whatever the object you create inside the constructor of any class, that is nothing but dependency injection. Right? So how do we create a generic function? So this is also advanced, so we can skip. So in services, only two theoretical questions normally anyone can ask, like what is service? What is the use of service? Don't just say like to create the API functions call, we use the service. No, it's not like that. We can create normal functions also. So any code which is any .ts means programming code which you are going to use over multiple components. So you can keep that code in a service and use that code. So it gives you the reusability. And second question, what is dependency injection? So object we create into the constructor is nothing but dependency injection. That's it. Let's move on to the routing. Okay, so routing is also another important part of the Angular. So as everyone say, like Angular is a single page application, SPA, single page application, means we only have a one index.html file. So that file will be there across whole application, right? Whole application will be loaded into that app root selector. So if we don't create the routes also, you can manage the same in app component also. If you have, let's say we have this home interview question, pre-API and again interview question. So let's say we just have an app component and we created many different components. We don't have the route, but on click of this, you can just hide and show particular component by using that selector, right? So we don't have the need to create routing like using multiple URL we can access. But if your project is very small and if you have 4 to 5 components, then it is easy. But let's say you have so many components, then to manage using hide and show on the button click, it won't be easy. So to achieve that, right? So it is a web application. So you should, it should be all the pages like component should be accessible with URL, right? So to achieve that multiple page-based navigation means from user component, we are redirecting to admin component or login component, we are redirecting to some dashboard component. So to achieve this, we have to use routing. So that is the definition. Angular is a single page application. So to achieve multiple page-based navigation, we have to use the routing library, which is provided by Angular. We can create different routes for different components. Okay, so as you can see, route is an object which consists of mandatory 2 fields. Okay, route contains many more fields, but these are the 2 mandatory ones, that is path and the component. So path is nothing but the URL of your component, and component, this is like on this URL. If in the browser we have the admin, so like which component you have to render, so admin component. Same like that, you can see second path login, component login. We can add guards also. Then title, you can give the title here itself. So from Angular 14, you get to create the title in here only, right? Previously we had that title service, but it is now deprecated. So features of routing are as easy to access routes, route guards. We can add the guards also, like can activate, can activate not, can load, can deactivate. So many guards are there. So Angular router is a core part of the Angular platform. It enables developer to build a single page application with multiple views and allow navigation between these views. So this is kind of a hard definition. It enables developer to build a single page application with multiple views and allow navigation between these views. So this is everything you should explain when someone asks you like what is Angular router. Okay. Next thing is what is router outlet. So you must have seen this router outlet. So router outlet is a directive which is responsible to display the activated route component. Means Let's say in the URL, we have this admin URL. So it is router outlet will display admin component. So here it will display the component. Got it? So router outlet is a directive which is responsible to display the activated route component. Means it will load the current route component in the place of the router outlet. Then router link. The router link in normal HTML pages we had the href. So just a replacement of that href, we have the router link. So when it get compiled, router link will get automatically converted to href only. But while writing, we have to use the router link. So router link is also kind of a directive which we use on the anchor tag to provide the route path. So router link equal to then the path name, like whatever the path we create here, like admin login, this will go over here. Then router, active router link. So we have multiple routes, but at a point, only one route will be activated. So if we have to add some class to the activated route, so you can use router link active and you can pass the class name. So router link active is again a directive that toggles CSS class. Means in the URL, if your to-do list is there, so it will add active class to this anchor tag. And if completed route is there, so it will add this class, then remove from this. Only out of this, one route will be activated at a time. So it will add an active class over there. So this is the example of activated router link. Next is activated route. So with activated route, this is just a service which is provided by the router. So you can see activated route in the name itself, activated route. Activated route contains the information about the route associated with the component loaded in the router outlet. Means whatever the current route is there, it can provide the information of that route. Means whatever the, if you have stored some value into that route, any query parameters are there, so you can get the data from that. Next thing, how do you define the route? So we have already seen. So this is the route with parameter. Then this is empty route. If it is empty, where we have to redirect to do, so it will redirect over here. This is wildcard route, star. If it didn't found any route, so it will show this component. Okay, and we have to add, this is a route array, and we pass it into the module, that is router module for route and app routes. That's it. Okay, next thing is what are guards. Since Angular is a client-side application, so we need to guard our application. Like if user is logged in, then only we have to allow user to access any route. So for that, we have to use the guards. So as a fresher level, it is not necessary that you go into the deep, but just a simple definition will be enough. Like guards are responsible to guard our routes. So there are multiple guards like can activate child, can deactivate, resolve, and card load. So these are the various guards we have. Can activate, can check to see if the user can visit a route. Before activating any route, it will execute this function. Can activate child, check to see if a user can visit the children route. Can deactivate, check to see if the user can exit route. Suppose we are in the admin route, and if we try to navigate, so before navigation, it will hit this function. Resolve is a guard which we normally use if we have to call some data before any route load. Okay, so in that case, we have to implement the resolve. Can load checks to see if the user can route the module. This can load will be used when we create the application with lazy loading. So you can see this is the basic example of the can activate guard. So in can activate guard, we normally, what do we write when we use the login page? Once we log in, and if user whatever the details we pass is correct, so we get the details from the API side, user detail that we stored into the local storage or the session storage. So after login, what we do on all the guards, we add this can activate guard, and in here we simply check like in local storage or session storage we have the particular key or not. If it is there, we return true. Otherwise, we redirect to the login page. So this way we protect our guards. So if in session storage we have this value, then we will allow the user to access that route. Otherwise, we will redirect to the login page. Okay, so these are the basic questions we have in routing. Let's see the forms now. Obviously, so we use Angular just to create a software, right, which is meant to deal with data. It is supposed to display some data, it is supposed to store some data, it is supposed to delete some data. or update, basic CRUD operation, create, update, delete, and read, right? So to achieve those things, we have to create the form. So in Angular, we have two types of form. First is the template and second is the reactive. So template means by using ng model. So someone will ask like, what are the steps to create template forms? So you just have to simply explain. To use ng model, first you have to add forms module in your app module, right? So first step is like you have to add a forms module into the import section of the app module. Then you have to create an object. Then in HTML, you have to bind the properties into that from this object using ng model. So you can see ng model employee object dot name. These are the properties. Then you can show the validation also. You can first apply the required, min length, max length. What are the rules and regulation you need on that particular text box? Then creating hash value. See, hash value I have created, hash value is employee emp name, and I have stored ng model into this hash value. Then you can create a separate div. You can add an ng statement if this text box is touch or dirty, just an additional check. Then multiple span for the multiple required, multiple validation. This is for the required. Emp name dot errors required. Then you can show this like that. You can have min length, max length, pattern, as number of validation you can have. So these are the 3 steps you should explain when someone asks you like steps to create the template form. Same as in the reactive form. So reactive form has more component code. So first step, I have missed the first step. Like we have to add this forms module. So in here only we have to add reactive form module into the import section if we have to use reactive form. Then we have to create a form group. Then inside the .ts only, we have to add the control to this form group we have created. So we add the controls like this. If we have to provide initial value, you can provide like here. Then in HTML, we have to bind this my form to the form using form group name. Then instead of ng model, in template form, we use the ng model, right? But in reactive form, we have to use form controller name. So what are the things we create here? Name, email, message, you can bind it over here using the name. Next question everyone will ask, like, what is the difference between template and the reactive? Okay, so you can see in template driven forms are very suitable for the simple scenario. Okay, but it fails for the complex scenario. Then template form supports two-way data binding because it uses ng model. In template form, we have a very less component code. We just have to create an object. That's it, right? But in reactive form, we have more code. So this is the component. So you can see we have more code on the .ts, right? And less HTML code. So this is the first important is two-way data binding. Template driven form supports two-way data binding, and reactive driven form doesn't support two-way data binding. And it is mainly used for the handling complex scenarios. Okay, so these are the 3 questions which is very mandatory and the necessary if you are looking for the fresher kind of interview. Next thing is HTTP client. So this is the last topic. These are the all basic topics we have. So whenever we do the API call, so we do the API call. So Angular is a client-side technology. So obviously we don't have access to the database. So we have to depend on the API. So to call the API or to integrate the API, we have to rely on the HTTP client library. Just like we had the routing library, just like that we have HTTP client library, which is provided by Angular. So you can see the definition. Most front-end applications communicate with backend services over HTTP protocol. Okay, so you can see HTTP we write now, that is nothing but protocol. So most modern browser supports 2 different APIs, that is for HTTP and XML fetch API. This comes from the JavaScript. So HTTP client will come from the Angular common/HTTP library. Offers a simplified client HTTP API for Angular application. Okay, so with HTTP, first step is like we have to import HTTP client module into our import section into our app module. First step. Then you can write normal code like HTTP this.http.get post. Then you have to pass the URL name and then .subscribe. You do normal API call. So you can see this is kind of a API call. Okay. HTTP interceptor is HTTP interceptors is like it monitor the incoming and outgoing requests from your application. So example on what you can say task variety of tasks like authentication, logging, caching, fake backend, header modifying. These are the various ways how you do it. Okay, so interceptor is kind of a advanced topic, so no one will ask you unless you are showing more than 2+ experience. So this is the basic interview question like component, directives, pipes, services, routing, forms, and HTTP client. So in Angular, we just have these major topics. So let's see the basic interview questions. So decorators. So we have seen like on the component, we get @component. In the pipe, we get @pipe. In the service, we get @injectable. In module, we get @module. So that are nothing but decorators. So the definition is purpose of Angular decorator is to store the metadata about the class, method, and property. It informs Angular how to process the class or the method. We have several types of decorators. Class decorator example is @component. Whatever we write about the class, @pipe, @injectable, @module, and @directive. Then we have method decorator. Method decorator is the host listeners. When we create custom directive now, we use the host listener. Property decorator. We have whatever we apply before the variable, that is input and output. Parameter decorator, that is @inject. It will go inside the constructor. So these are the 4 different types of decorators we have. Next question, let's see. Module. Module is kind of a intro question in your ask. So module are logical boundaries in your Angular application. So module is a place where you can group component, directives, services, and everything into which is related to your application. So it has direct declarations. So in declarations, it will go component, directive, and pipe. Then we have imports. In import, we will put all the modules. Then we have providers. In provider, we will go to the we will place all the services, right? So just a definition is like modules are logical boundaries in your application where the application is divided into separate module to separate the functionality of application. A simple definition is like it is a place where you can group component, directive, pipes, and services which are related to the application. TypeScript. TypeScript is like, since in Angular we use with the TypeScript, we can use simple JavaScript also, or one more Dart language is also there. Instead of TypeScript, we can use those also. But since when we create the normal project and TypeScript supports some of the OOPS concepts, so we go for the TypeScript. So TypeScript is a type superset of JavaScript created by Microsoft. So TypeScript is created by the Microsoft that adds optional type, classes, async command, and many other features like and compiled to the plain script. Means when we compile, TypeScript get compiled to the JavaScript only because Angular browser understand JavaScript only. Okay. Angular CLI. So whatever the commands we write, ng serve, ng generate component, ng generate pipe. So these are all the commands which are supported by the Angular CLI. So Angular CLI command line interface is a command line interface to scaffold and build Angular app using Node.js style. Okay. So to install the Angular CLI, we have to install the first npm install, then our package Angular CLI.less. It will install the latest Angular CLI version. So these are the basic questions everyone will ask. So hope this interview topics is going to be useful for you. These are the very basic topics we have covered. In next video, I will try to cover all the advanced and the compiler related, some random questions, some scenario based questions into the next video. Please do like and subscribe if you are finding my videos helpful. Please do share also. Thank you.